Imagine you've just lost your mother. You made all the arrangements. You signed the paperwork. You paid in full. The funeral home has her body. And then one morning you get a phone call. The funeral home is closed. Not closed for the weekend. Not closed for a holiday. Closed permanently. Bankrupt. Locked up. Gone. And nobody, not the owner, not the state, not the bank, can tell you where your mother's body is. This is not a hypothetical. This has happened more than once, in more states than you want to know. And the laws designed to protect you when it does? In most of the country, they barely exist. The funeral industry in America operates on a simple and surprisingly fragile financial model. A family comes in. They pay up front, sometimes thousands of dollars, for services that haven't happened yet. The funeral home takes that money and is supposed to hold it, or use it only for the agreed services. The problem is that nobody is really watching. Unlike banks, which are heavily regulated and insured, funeral homes operate under a patchwork of state laws with wildly different requirements. Some states require funeral homes to put prepaid funeral funds into a trust. Others don't. Some require regular financial audits. Others rely entirely on complaint-driven oversight, meaning nobody checks until something goes wrong. And things go wrong more than the industry wants to admit. In 2009, the Burr Oak Cemetery in Chicago, one of the most historically significant black cemeteries in America, was found to be reselling burial plots. Workers were digging up existing graves, dumping the remains, and selling the plots again to new families. When investigators arrived, they found remains scattered across the grounds. Some had been tossed into a pond. Families who had been visiting graves for decades discovered their loved ones were no longer there. In 2014, the Lamb Funeral Home in Temple, Georgia closed suddenly after the owner abandoned the business. Investigators found bodies in various states of decomposition inside the facility. Some had been there for months. Families had no idea. In 2018, the Serenity Funeral Home in Alabama was found to have stored over 30 bodies in deplorable conditions. The owner had collected payments from families, performed no services, and left bodies in an unrefrigerated facility in summer heat. In each of these cases, the pattern is the same. Small funeral home, financial trouble. Owner stops performing services but keeps collecting money. Bodies pile up. Eventually, a neighbor complains about a smell. And by then, the damage is done. Here's the question that should make you angry. How does this keep happening? The answer is a combination of weak regulation, underfunded oversight, and an industry that has successfully lobbied against meaningful consumer protections for decades. The Federal Trade Commission's funeral rule was enacted in 1984 and has not been substantially updated since. It says almost nothing about what happens to prepaid funds. It doesn't require insurance. It doesn't mandate inspections. A 2023 analysis found that fewer than half of U.S. states require funeral homes to place prepaid funeral funds in protected trusts. In states without this requirement, a funeral home owner can legally take your prepaid money and spend it on anything they want. Your $8,000 prepaid funeral fund could be paying for the owner's gambling debts, their mortgage, their car payments, and if they go bankrupt before your funeral happens, in many states, you are an unsecured creditor. You get in line behind the bank, behind the IRS, behind the landlord. You may get nothing back. When a funeral home fails and bodies are left behind, the response depends entirely on where you are. In some states, The funeral board has emergency authority to take custody of bodies and arrange for proper disposition at state expense. In others, the county medical examiner takes over. In others still, there is no clear protocol, and families are left navigating a bureaucratic nightmare while their loved one sits in an abandoned building. The process of identifying, claiming, and properly burying abandoned remains can take weeks or months. And the owners? In most cases, they face license revocation and civil suits. Criminal charges are filed less often than you'd think. The system protects almost nobody except the funeral home owner. There are things you can do to protect yourself. If you're prepaying for funeral services, ask specifically whether your funds will be held in a protected trust, in what institution, and what happens to that money if the funeral home closes. Get it in writing. Check your state funeral regulatory board's website for any complaints or disciplinary actions. And if you're arranging services after a death and something feels wrong, calls aren't being returned, explanations don't add up, trust that instinct. Contact your state funeral board immediately. This is Coffin Ledger. Wait for our next video on funeral home disasters.